me see. There you go.
Hi, David Devine. It's great to talk to you. Well, it's really nice as well just to talk to another author. I just wanted to share with you and those at home about this book God gave me to do as well. And I know you have maybe some things to share about your own writing, but um, I think that one of the greatest things that we can do as writers is to help the church to examine life and how it relates to the Bible and God's will. And because I think people are so rushed these days, they just kind of don't give enough time. But I suppose when somebody else does have the time and investigates and finds things, it just makes it easier for people. So I think maybe that's the one reason why God, has people to, has a calling to write. So I wrote a book called The Friendship Realm myself, and it's kind of like it goes through the Bible stories, but it has a specific program, a kind of a vision for the book. And it's the way how to know God, like a full, complete way. Because I feel that many Christians, around the world, millions of Christians, they feel maybe they're just missing out on a lot and they don't know what exactly it is and why that is. So maybe that's why the Lord, got me to write about this in a kind of full program. And I just found that it keeps coming up in the Bible stories. So there's three main stories that is in this particular book, and that's Mary and Martha, and David and Jonathan, and Elijah and Elisha. But it's really interesting when you compare and contrast. Maybe you probably do that in your writing as well. It's just a way to bring out be there. And so I just found that in that, like, even with that story, Mary and Martha, that's very special because they had Jesus in person and God was trying to bring together a ministry team. And they're kind of very down to earth, making plenty of mistakes, and so that we can learn from them. So, but I just found that it's probably the one that is actually one of the best to follow, because to actually have a model, because Mary starts off, in Luke 7, I think it is, with her. She aligned her pain, her burden to God, and it was so powerful. And she inadvertently was becoming a helper immediately because people were around to see her new identity. So I think identity is a very big one, But but when Martha and her were alone with Jesus, Mary didn't really see her new identity. It didn't really see her as an example, and just went off and did her own thing. So I just found that very interesting about identity as well. Like, how do you establish it? Well, I just think that it's just so important just to be a minister for yourself, and and be a minister for others, but get the balance right. So that's what I found is a major thing that comes up in these stories, and I've seen it in real life, myself. That you feel, I can sense, people are really keen in the ministry, but they've forgotten maybe to be a minister for themselves as well, to give time out for that. So that can be a challenge, But what do you reckon yourself?
Well, that's a great story of those two sisters. I've written about them a little bit myself. It's very interesting how Jesus took the one and aside when he wasn't even quite in the city of Bethany, just sent word and she came to him. And of course, Lord, if you'd have been here, my brother still be alive, and that's a true statement. And that's why he couldn't be there, John. And it's a little bit of it's taught me a little bit as I'm praying for people that are sick and dying. I realize, I'm just like Mary and Martha. I'm praying for this person not to die. And oh boy, if only Jesus would show up and take care of that. And Jesus he knew he couldn't show up because he would have taken care of that. That's why he had to tarry so long. And then the older sister follows, and there's a conversation there. But when it came time to get, show me where the tomb is, when it came time to say, open the rock, it was the older sister that said, oh, Lord, it's not going to smell right. It's been 3 days or so. And sees the one who hadn't spent the time with Jesus. You're going to be just between these two sisters. You see a dynamic between one who spent time sitting at the feet of the Lord, listening to him, taking in every word, and one who was busy doing the stuff, doing this, trying to take care of everybody and be the hostess with the mostest. So that's a great story. I think that was a good one for you to key on, John.
Yeah. Oh, well, there's so much really in that one itself. I mean, I think Jesus' tears were about, his burden to establish those sisters' ministry, and they weren't doing a great job because they were just I just really sensed myself that Martha really needed time alone with the Lord, and that's what Jesus had in mind for her, so that she can be to get truth instilled in her inner being, so that she can be an encouragement to Mary, so that she can react differently than how she reacted. Because I could see that the two sisters had the same spirit. They say, why weren't you here? So it was the same questions that were brewing in them. So I just felt as well, there's a lesson there, as there's, to sense when to stay, apart from people and when to be with them. So that was a time, I think Martha, I think she cut it short, and went back to Mary with still a lot of things that needed to be sorted out, like to bring the calmness that God wanted Martha to bring to Mary. So I just saw that myself, and that God is so keen in ministry and using us, and to be out with people, and so that we can, bring the light of Christ. But yeah, it's an amazing story. But as well as that, when you compare and contrast to like David and Jonathan, okay, they didn't have Jesus in person, but they were, on fire for God. And Jonathan went really well. It started really well, but I just saw that the lack of the sanctification maybe was the problem in that whole story. As with Mary, it wasn't. But so I just thought as well, that it's getting the balance right as well between faith and sanctification, like to have both, so I just noticed as well that Jonathan and David didn't spend nearly enough time together. They kept on just leaving each other, but David was accepting of Jonathan leaving, so he wasn't really great at maybe expressing that, like, where are you going? Why are you going back there? But I know there's a bit of sense, because maybe David thought that Jonathan could maybe be some kind of help in that, in security, for David. But all in all, and they just didn't seem to investigate enough what was going on. So I just feel that, the Father is working around us and trying to do many things, and when we don't investigate enough, we can miss out on the blessings that he's trying to give us and other people as well, and to use us mightily. So so I think it's just such a shame about that story, because there's so much to learn from. So
Well, I feel we have like a Mary and a Martha. Each of us have a Mary and a Martha operating in our lives, and one wants us to focus on stuff, and one wants us to spend more time with the Lord. Isn't that a struggle pretty much for everybody? And so the goal of people like you and I that have a message, that write books to speak to people that are either believers in Jesus or want to be, or thinking about it, just investigating. You know, the beauty of that is we're trying to get everybody to feed the Mary, feed your Mary. You know, that's let that be your default. That, you know, I'm going to spend my time with the Lord is more precious than my time doing some other things. Now, granted, you know, things need to get done. All right, obviously they do. Someone's got to make a meal for people to eat. Someone's got to change a dirty diaper if that's a need with a little small child. So this stuff things do have to get done. Excuse me, but so often, like a non-Christian book called, I believe, the Tyranny of the Urgent, we let that we let that dominate, and when we really shouldn't. It's just, you know, be still and know that I am God. It is, you know, they that wait upon the Lord will renew their strength. Well, what's the prerequisite there? Well, waiting upon the Lord. Okay, so we want to encourage people to do what we know or have experienced will feed their faith and help them to obey the Lord and to, you know, seek, follow, and stay in His will. Seek, discover, and stay in His will. And so that's pretty much it. And then if it's not a Christian living aspect of the writing, then it's a draw people to Christ aspect. Growing Through God's Way, in my opinion, is about 200 or so, 300-page gospel tract. You know, the Lord straight up told me, you're writing this to non-believers. Well, is there anything for believers to get out of it? Oh yeah, there's a lot to get out of it for the believer. Because the man I'm writing about, Paul Gauci, it's his biography really, had an intimate relationship with the Lord, and it inspires people to see somebody live out that way, and just have come into a situation in life and say, and inquire of God. That's the key thing, learning to inquire and just say, God, what's going on here? Why did this happen? How come this failed? Why, you know? And we're asking God questions that we don't know the answers to, but He does, and that's how He got started, and what made Him so known around the world. Because that book went to over a dozen countries. Is he had a problem of not being able to have a well that he could water his garden and orchard with. He took it to the Lord. Say, you know, what do I do? God said, well, look what I do. You know, and which was to cover the earth with a covering. And Paul realized that, and then he got it. I mean, it's just like the bulb came on, the epiphany hit, the download was received, and he's like, oh, you put a covering. Yeah, you don't till, you don't fertilize necessarily. I mean, other than, you know, cedar, you know, other than pine needles and cedar leaves and other kind of leaves, maple, oak, whatever leaves fall, and they do kind of re-fertilize the ground and cover it as well. So that was a huge revelation for him, and he's lived that out, and people from all over the world are encouraged by him, and he's physically got a disability that hasn't kept him from being able to make this happen in his garden, in his orchard. And that also has encouraged people that don't have limitations on their mobility that he has, stemming, I think, from some Agent Orange exposure in Vietnam. So there you have it. So you have a testimony. This is the problem. This is the question. This is how God answered. This is how Paul obeyed. These are the results. And the results have been amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I was just thinking about that myself before you started talking about asking questions to God. And I think it's just much better, I think, to just have God's heart before asking them the questions. And I'm just thinking of a baby, in a car, or a toddler, and they'd be asking lots of questions, maybe, where are we going? Why are we doing that?
Are we there yet?
Well, yeah, but that's inherent in all of us, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's to stop, at that age. I think we're made to be an investigator of life, and there's so much there's maybe to investigate, and we can't be missing out on things that God is trying to do, or maybe where we're going wrong even. But I just found myself, it's so much better to be with a few around who are maybe even as a ministry partners, who are active on the ground and involved in your life and in the work of what God is trying to do, so that, it's kind of like a safety net, I think, from going out of step, or just misinterpreting what God is trying to say or doing. Because, when God is, when we're available, it can be a challenge to know minute by minute how God is leading. And so I think the more we become a spirit of investigating, and but with the right questions, I think it's a much better place, But you know what? That is something major in the story of Elijah and Elisha that I've discovered. That God was trying to get Elisha to ask those questions, and he was using prophets to try to get him to investigate how he was feeling and what he should be doing. And but he just didn't. He just was so in following someone else's mode that he just didn't. He just didn't get into that kind of role as an investigator of life. So this is something I think major in my spirit, anyway, that I really have want to, to see the church move into, And I really do believe that, God is working all the time and doing so many things, and we don't see it. We can just, we might even notice that we're missing out on what God is trying to do. So I was really amazed in that story as well, and it just spoke to me. And so the secret place, the private time with God, I think there's many different aspects. Of course, it's like maybe confessing sin, bringing things up in the past, and when the Lord sees that we're interested in that, He might have His own things He wants to bring up, and even the generations, because I think it's just part of the. I think to get started, I think just like Mary, that's what got her started, and I think that's one thing where we can connect to our the new creation self and to God, and then after ask questions about, okay, what am I supposed to be doing? How am I going to do it? Who's going to help me even? So yeah.
I'm gonna keep going on that realm. If you would, John, I'm gonna have to pause my video feed for a second, but I will just say that inquiring of the Lord began with Rebecca. That's the first mention that I can find in the first covenant of God's word. She was expecting. She had twins. She was expecting twins, but things were going on within her body that just wasn't typical of someone carrying twins. And she must have asked all of her girlfriends. We don't hear this in scripture. It's just human nature. You know, did this happen to you? Did this happen to you? And everyone's like, no, you know, so she was befuddled. And so this is what is amazing is she didn't, in considering the culture, she didn't ask. We're not told that she asked her husband. Maybe she did, but we're not told that. And she didn't really even ask a priest or the high priest to carry the water for her to ask God about this. She went right to the Lord and said, God, what is happening here? And the cool part is he answered her, which means that, you know, that did not offend him, right? It's like, oh, you didn't go through channels. No, she asked him and he answered her and he said, you have two nations in your womb, right? And he explained it to her, you know, this is different and they're always going to be at each other in some form. And may not have been the answer she wanted to hear, but it was an answer from the God. I'm going to take away my video and I'll redo the video as soon as I can while you're talking and responding. So go right ahead, John.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So another thing that kind of hit me was that okay, so we can actually hear perfectly well from God and everything goes well, and we can, but you know, there's still the demand to listen to new instructions, because we mightn't hear anything, but we might just go default to the old way that works before, but it's not at all what's going to work. So that just came to me as well, you know, that I just believe myself that, you know, when we go through maybe a kind of like a program of a, you know, just like a tick box of the things that we're supposed to do in a relationship with God, and that it just makes it much easier to hear him. And it's so important just to know his heart, which is I believe, you know, repentance and faith, listening to him, giving time out to listen to him, and to discover what he's saying, but also to invest in it, because we can tend to be presumptuous and think that that's all that there is to learn, but there's so much more, and we're just maybe getting started. So that's just, I'm even speaking to myself here. And then you've got ministry as well, which is a huge thing. So it's taking out the bad, bringing in good. And ministry is a major thing in God's agenda. And so when you don't know what that is, it's nearly the first thing to investigate, you know, with God. That's an excellent question. What is the calling of my life? What am I supposed to do? You know, that is just huge. But it's so vital as well. And there is a claim, you know, that people are not interested in what God, you know, wants to do through them. So that's probably one reason why they're not hearing from the Lord. You know, so when he sees that people are interested, then he comes along. Oh, okay, so you're interested? Well, actually, I have this amazing thing for you to do. So sometimes, you know, God is kind of like very gentle, but that needs us to kind of break out and ask the questions and you know, the things that are in his heart as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah. So that really spoke to me, and just to have a kind of like a formula, just to remind us of what we're supposed to be doing, and that helps us to connect with him and to get into the flow of how he's moving. So that's what I found myself anyway. So but yeah, so but another person that really spoke to me as well is about Rahab. So I ended up writing much more about her than I thought I would. And the reason is because well, you see, mentioned twice in the New Testament, in Hebrews and and Peter as well, you know, that she was an amazing example. And but I really believe that she was doing some things, and some things are happening in the secret place for her to be prepared for that kind of memorial stone of when she was welcoming to the spies. So she was already welcoming the testimony of God. And when we give the testimony of God to people, God is working tremendously and preparing them for maybe encounter or a way that they can help, you know, with God's plans and purposes. But a lot of time it's about helping ourselves first in the secret place, I think. So we're prepared to help out in you know, outwardly. So yeah, but there is so much to her as well. Like she kind of gave up and trusting in man, you know. So this is what testimonies can do, even with the work that you've done. I don't think maybe we realize how much good, you know, that you know, even your book, you know, can do when people start realizing that God is real and that, you know, they need to know him, and you know that that you know, that's what these testimonies about Israel and what God was doing was the reason why Rahab, you know, acted the way she did. And it kind of sealed her destiny when she you know, had the right spirit, you know, that was totally different than what was around her. So
And we
but
never know how God's going to reward us with our faithfulness. And in the case of the Rechabites, they're a family from that ended up to Jonadab, and they you know, their Rechab, their patriarch, if you will, you know, said, "Hey, kids, we're not gonna build houses. We're not gonna own land. We're not gonna drink wine. We're just gonna roam around and try to be a blessing and keep ourselves fed and do what they." And so that was unheard of back. I mean, wine was like water is to us, basically, more than beer to people in Germany, okay, or wine in Italy. It was the safe thing to drink for almost any age. And so for some guy to set a standard, set the bar at, you know, we're not going to drink anything alcoholic, was unheard of. But, you know, they kept in line with that. And then it got to the point where it was tested, where they brought Jonadab and his sons and whatever into the temple. And remember, the prophet set wine before them. Here you go, guys. You know, I'm your host. You're here, and drink up. And Jonadab had to say, you know, this is awesome, but no, we cannot do that. You know, our family has vowed not to go there, and that's what we're going to do. And God was so impressed with that. And by the way, this is telling me I got 10 more minutes. The Zoom people. That he said, you know, you shall never lack a man to stand before me, like forever, you know, before my throne. I mean, it's like, so I got to believe that one of the 24 elders in the book of Revelation is from the Rechabites. You know, it's amazing. Now in Rahab's case, and the takeaway for me in Rahab is, in any other person, like you said, that maybe hasn't been alone with the Lord, had their secret time with him, any other person, if these two Israelites would have shown up, you know, it's like, whoa, you're the enemy, you're spies, you know, you're bad. Mm-hmm. She didn't regard them as the enemy. I mean, they were spies, there's no denying that, but she, you know, she somehow realized that these were not enemies to her. These were her lifeline. These were like her guardian angels, is what it ended up being after they made their deal. I will hide you if you'll save me and my family. And she kept her end, they kept their end. And then how did God reward that? Her faith. You know, she's in the line of Jesus, in the lineage of Christ, of the Messiah. And she's not even a Jewish person. You know, so Hebrews, it's amazing. So we've got some time left, John. course, give you the last word if you have anything to say.
Yeah, I just am I'm excited just to know how the gospel really works. I've experienced it in my life, and you can have God in every moment. So there is like some things, during the day, like ticks, in the boxes of how that can happen and how to get just keep with the flow of how God is moving. And when we don't sense that, then we need to step back and start asking those questions that we were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just yeah. So that's I believe that how the book that I wrote is going to really affect people's lives. To have that experience, but to understand how God is moving and wants to move through us and in us as well. And what exactly to do in that secret place. Because I think people think it's kind of just a wait. It is a waiting, but a lot of the time I think God is probably waiting for his children to do something or to move in a certain way or to say something that he's longing to hear or something. Well, I think ministry is a major thing for that, but there can be obstructions to how Chris to be connected to the new creation that he has made, and he wants to remove them, so he needs just to be to have that role as a kind of spiritual priest to deal with the effects of sin and that as well, but also burdens as well. It's a huge thing, I think, to hand over the burdens to God, not because I think the enemy will use them otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's very conscious about that as well. So that's another major thing to do in the secret place, So yeah, it was just wonderful to talk to you, Dave, and I'm sure you had plenty more to share, but myself as well. But I just it's just a great blessing to talk to you.
Well, you as well. I appreciate that. And you're right. God is waiting for us to move. You can't steer a ship that's just bobbing up and down. It's got to be moving. The wind or the engines have got to be moving it through the water. Then you can steer it. And God wants us to move. He made the Israelites move for 40 years. He made Abram move before he became Abraham. So moving is pretty critical. Our goal is to try to stay within that narrow road and not go into this ditch or that ditch, but just, spend time with the Lord. He led the Israelites by cloud and by fire in that time. What's he doing now? Well, the cloud and the fire is the Holy Spirit. He's still leading us. It's just a different manifestation of the cloud and the fire. It's a whole nother topic. And I hope we maybe, either you'll write about it or I'll write about it. We'll both write about it or we'll talk about it on Zoom sometime. But thanks for reaching out, and I enjoyed our time together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just what you said there was just so powerful, really, just sensing God's leading, and I hope that today people just understand more about how that can happen. So
Yep.
It's great talking to you, Dave, and everyone at home. God bless you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.